So I think it's possibly a combination of these factors rather than just one.
Okay. Before we actually give you an opportunity to come back onto that, I'm just going to read out some results and then we're going to come to your interview from yesterday. We have got, there's a divisional summary. 1 minute. Right, Andy Burnham has officially won. We've got the results in. So that's from Manchester. So Andy Burnham for the Labour Party, 473,024. And I think it was Laura Evans for the Conservative, 113,753. So well done to Andy Burnham there. And then we've got also some results. I'm just trying to... Okay. We'll come back to Dewsbury in a minute. So I know some Dewsbury results are coming in. The overall results for Dewsbury, Liberal Democrats doing well in Dewsbury. So, Kamran, if you're still with us, you'll be very happy to hear about that. We're going to play your interview, County Councillor Azza, and then we'll come back to you. So let's play. Let's what you had to say yesterday.
We've had excellent results here today in Pendle for the County Council elections. County Councillor Mohammed Iqbal increased it, almost doubled his majority today from 700 to 1,300. I also kept my majority over 1,000 votes, and that sends a strong message to the community in Pendle that Labour has held its strongholds. We've increased our majorities, and it clearly demonstrates that we were working for the local community. Of course, you can't fight a national current on the back of the vaccination bounce for the Conservatives, but here in Pendle we've held our own, and where our seats are, we've retained the seats, and we've increased our majorities, which is brilliant news for local people.
Okay, so if I actually listen to what you just said in terms of what's happening locally and listen to you what's happened locally, it's quite confusing, because you're saying that we've actually gained and we've done well and we've retained, and you're saying that at last the voters believe that they've been listened to. So what is actually happening? Have you changed your mind overnight, or you still believe what you said yesterday?
Well, I said this earlier on today, actually. I believe that, you talked about what voters' perceptions are. In the area that I stand, people have, put their confidence back in me. They re-elected me with a similar majority to what I had got last time. My colleague, County Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, who's also leader of the Labour group on Pendle Council, his majority almost doubled from where it was 4 years ago. And that shows that people have confidence in us as their elected representatives, as Labour representatives. And what we've seen in some of the wards in Pendle, particularly in Nelson Byfield days, our Labour vote has gone up in some of those areas. But we also have to accept, and in some of the wards where there's high concentrations of minority communities, Pakistani Kashmiri communities, there is personality politics as well, and there's a bloodly politics. All these things still happen. Some of those lines have become blurred now, right? And this issue that you raised before with Nadeem around working class and the elite, those lines have become quite blurred. Most of our councillors are graduates. They're probably the first people in their families that went to university. I think Nadeem and I are both the first in our families who went to university. So those lines have become blurred. And if you look at '97 when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, right, there was like a red wave that went through the country. The similar thing at the moment with the Conservatives. And in politics, you have these waves. Yeah, you have this sort of momentum, and then that momentum eases, and then there's something else that happens. But I think, if I look at Lancashire as a whole, I've got colleagues like Hasina Khan, who's a councillor, former Mayor Chorley, which is predominantly a white community with a very small Muslim community, but she's, been the mayor, she's on the cabinet. Yes. I look at Great Harwood, where Nuldar Aziz was elected this afternoon, a white community where he's fought the battle there, and everyone said there's no way a Muslim could be elected there, and he's been elected. In Burnley, you got Sobia Malik and others. So, there's across the parties, without being party political, across the parties, we have people who've succeeded. I mean, Nadeem, won in Barrowford, where people said, well, actually, they wouldn't elect an Asian as a councillor. So he's broken through that glass ceiling. So I think across all parties, people are breaking through those glass ceilings, right? And I think that's a good thing because it's healthy for politics.
But in terms of, you mentioned the fact of, in terms of personality politics and brotherhoodism and family, we spoke about that yesterday. We have got an interview now of, I think it's Councillor Iqbal, and we'll get you to actually comment on that. So let's have a look at that interview from the count.
For each candidate is as follows. Aslam Mohammed, the Conservative Party candidate, 2,638. Iqbal Mohammed, Labour Party, 3,914. Marty Annette Irene, Green Party, 210. Thomas Mary Elizabeth, Liberal Democrat, 174. There were 85 spoiled papers and the turnout was 55.66%. And I hereby declare that Mohammed Iqbal is duly elected.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart those people that have supported me during this campaign. Alhamdulillah, with a record vote across the county, almost 4,000, I think, has sent a clear message to the Conservatives here in Bradfield and Nelson West that their divisive politics has failed. But I'm proud of being re-elected to Lancashire County Council, and inshallah I will continue the hard work that I've done for the last 4 years. But doubling my majority is clearly a credit to the community that has put me in this position. Alhamdulillah.
We've had
Okay, before we get, I think we're going to bring Cameron back in from Yorkshire. I do want Cameron to talk about what's been happening there. Welcome back, Cameron. So we're just going to concentrate a little bit about what's been happening in Dewsbury. I know some results have come in, and then we'll come back to talking about what's happening over here in Pendle. Why is it, Cameron, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you've done ever so well within certain areas like Dewsbury, but yet in other areas you haven't? What's been the special X factor or factor within your particular area, other than you, of course, Cameron, because you're from there?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me back on there. Before I answer your question, can I touch upon something that was discussed a few moments ago? And let me congratulate Councillor Nadeem for being elected leader of his particular patch. You've got the Conservative Party who've absorbed the Brexit vote, they've absorbed the UKIP vote, they've absorbed the Brexit Party vote, and then you've got the Labour Party who are under Keir Starmer are trying to go towards the right, like they were back in 1997 under the Blair years. And what's really happening is you'll have a situation very shortly where a lot of people, after this particular boom, so to speak, will feel that they're being ignored by both of the main political parties, and then will turn to the smaller parties. And that's where you'll see the parties like the Liberal Democrats gain even more success, gain even more councillors, and in due course elect even more parliamentarians.
But in Cameron, in particular within our local areas, we've seen the Liberal Democrats come into Pendle and Nelson and those areas, in Burnley in those areas. And if I take your argument that where the Labour has failed or Conservative have failed, they've had that opportunity. But traditionally within this particular patch, we've seen that, haven't we? But why is it that it doesn't then ripple across the country, if that's what you're saying, that they've not been listened to? Why are we always seeing patches of it? That's my question.
When you have smaller political parties, the Liberal Democrats have been, traditionally, we've been ignored many times by national media. You've got this narrative currently where it's almost like a two-party political state, but things are breaking down. For example, if you look at the results now, Liberal Democrats were polling around 17%. Now, the current election systems we have actually favour the two-party political system. So I think reform needs to also take place in how votes actually transfer into elected people. We must make votes a fairer system, and if that happens, you'll see more success. And once you have more success with the political parties, you'll make parties work together to ensure that nobody is ignored.
Okay, Cameron. I mean, please do stay with us and come into our conversation. As I want to pick you up on the issue of personality politics. and charisma. And X Factor was not the programme, but the X Factor, as in our Prime Minister Boris Johnson was mentioned several times yesterday, not by the Conservative Harry Booter, but our other colleague that was here from the Labour. I'm trying to think who was here from Labour.
Manzar Iqbal.
Manzar Iqbal, that's right. So Manzar he actually mentioned that more times than Harry did. I have got some results through East Midlands mayoral results here. Andy Street for the Conservative has got 299,318. And Leonburn for Labour has got 244,009. So they're Conservatives set to hold on to the seat in West Midlands. I think it should actually be East Midlands.
No, it's West Midlands.
Yeah. So so we've got some results, and we'll carry on with the results. But if I can actually talk about personalities and that, first of all, I think when Boris Johnson came in, and on the other side of the world we saw Donald Trump come in, personalities and personalities within politics became more prevalent, if I may say so, than ever before. But within Pakistani diaspora or Indian diaspora or minority diasporas, that's been there for a long time, hasn't it? And that's had a reflection on, you mentioned families. I mean, how does that sit with people like yourself who've seen it for so many years, County Councillor?
I think things are starting to change. You know, I got involved about 30 years ago in local politics, and when I first started, you know, in places like Pendle and Burnley and others as well, the Northwest, you had, you know, people standing for various political parties, but they had a strong family background and support. So, for example, you know, if you were standing, you had to come from a particular background or from a particular area, from Pakistan or Kashmir, and there was that support. And it wasn't Labour, it wasn't Liberal, it wasn't Tory, they were standing for a political party. That's changing over time. In terms of
was that a bad thing?
I think I think it wasn't a bad thing at the time, because you know, there weren't any councillors and people wanted to have representation, you know, and it was done with good intentions. I think now what we see is, you know, and without embarrassing Nadeem or, you know, my colleague Councillor Iqbal and others, you know, you get people who've been involved in politics, who people respect across political divides. Yeah, so we might have our ding-dongs in the council chamber, but we can sit down and have mature conversations about what the issues are that affect communities. And, you know, that personality politics you're saying, there are some larger-than-life characters, and Nadeem and I both know those, you know, characters in the community, you know, who sort of with their personality, etc., you know, dominate. But, you know, you mentioned Boris Johnson. You know, Boris Johnson is sort of figure who you love or you loathe. You know, there's no grey areas. You either really like him or and same happened with Jeremy Corbyn. People either liked him or didn't like him. So I think that's a norm in politics. I think there's nothing wrong with having colourful characters full of personality, as long as it's positive. And, you know, it gives you positive energy in the community and they make a positive contribution rather than do damage.
If I could come back to that, if I can actually use Kamran's words, divisive politics. One of the things that, in terms of, you know, I like my data and I like looking at data and I like to make my own sort of analysis of it, and there's lies, damn lies and statistics, but you take it where you are and you start with a hypothesis. Do you find that divisive politics have been used in the interest of political parties, but perhaps not in the interest of communities? If I can ask that question.
Yeah, I think the comment was made by Councillor Iqbal rather than the other gentleman in terms of divisive politics. But
sorry, yes, it was.
Yeah, it was Councillor Iqbal.
Yes.
I think we all have a responsibility as elected members to be responsible in what we say and do, because it reflects on others, and it can have harmful consequences in terms of dividing communities. But I don't think it's as big an issue as is being made out. That's my personal view. There are differences politically, people standing from different political parties, but that doesn't necessarily means that we are dividing communities. It just happens to mean that there's people with different political views standing on different political platforms. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I think opposition is a good thing. If you want to get things done, I think there should be opposition, as long as it's scrutinising and doing things in a positive manner, rather than making things public and, as Councillor Iqbal mentioned, in terms of the word divisive, rather than divided communities. So I don't think this is necessarily a big an issue as we make out.
But do you find, honestly speaking, hand on heart, that if you look at particular communities where there is a large particular diaspora, and then there happens to be clans who are quite strong politically, whether they're back home or here, do you think that those people that are involved in that selection process have got that information coming through, feeding through, and are using it with the best of intention, because ultimately they want to win, but they're using that as a way to get that win or to break that vote?
I think it's natural sometimes in anything in life. If you know somebody or know a particular family or you know particular members of the community on a personal level, they're more likely to back you based on knowing you rather than your abilities. So I think that perhaps does need to change. I think we should be having candidates who have the best ability rather than judging them on who they are or which family they belong to. And as Councillor Ali mentioned earlier, things are changing for the better, and it's only for us as elected members to make sure that we continue to move in the right direction and make sure that sort of divisive policies or decisions aren't brought into mainstream politics.
The overall data that's coming through at the moment, just to update you, the West of England seems to be taken by Labour from Conservatives. We have got, that's overall West of England, the turnout has been 36.2%. Labour, Dan Norris has got 125,482, as opposed to the Conservative Samuel Williams for 86,815. So some interesting information is coming through from different parts of the country, and this is obviously the mayoral elections as well. There has been quite a mix in terms of the information that's coming through. So you've got your county council elections going on, then you've got your local council elections going on. Then we've also got the police commissioners' elections going on, and then we've also got the mayoral elections on. So depending upon which bit you're interested in, and I got confused last night on a particular person whether they'd actually were standing for a county council seat or whether they were standing for a local council seat. If I can bring you back in, County Councillor Azza, just talking, I don't want to focus too much upon the negativity in terms of selection, but selection seems to have moved leaps and bounds, hasn't it, as well, in taking on the different dynamics of communities. But one particular point that was made yesterday from our guests, from Mansour and Harry when we had them in yesterday, and I want to bring Cameron in this as well, straight after when Az's made his sort of points on it. Language, to be able to converse in English. So put away gender, let's put away ethnicity, let's put away clans and families. But if your candidate can only speak one particular language, and that language doesn't happen to be English, is that an issue for that person in that particular area?
I believe so, absolutely. I think, if you cannot understand English, cannot speak, cannot read and write properly, it doesn't matter whether you are from a BME background or whether you're a white individual whose language skills are poor, you're going to struggle. You cannot represent your residents, your constituents in a council chamber or in dialogue via email mainly nowadays with officers if you're not able to read or write properly. So I think that's really important. I think that's one of the things that I've seen, and I hope Nadine will agree, that in Lancashire and the Northwest, more and more people who are getting elected are people who don't have to be graduates, but people from the community who are eloquent, who are able to converse in English, who can, whose communication skills are good, and they're making a difference. The ones you compare them with earlier generation of councillors who were great because they had a great vote bank in their community because of their blood or from the village or where they were from.
Community presence.
Yeah, absolute community presence, but they didn't have the same impact. They could shout, they could scream, they could mobilise people, but that didn't result in benefits to the community. And I think, now, across all parties, we're getting people who are graduates, and in Pendle, for example, we had the first Muslim woman councillor, Sadia Bashir. We've had, and then yesterday we elected another college lecturer, Ruby Anwar. And so we're finding also we want more women to come into politics across all parties. right? So we've got to break through those glass ceilings and actually change the culture of politics in our communities, which has been male dominated, and that has stopped women coming forward because they felt uncomfortable. But those changes are coming through now, and I think that we'll see more of that in the coming years from all parties.
I mean, we are hopefully going to have Councillor Ruby Anwar joining us a little bit later on, so it'll be wonderful to have her. But I want to bring Cameron back into this. So Cameron, you were saying that where they've not listened to, where the Conservatives haven't listened traditionally, or Labour haven't made a difference traditionally, that Liberal Democrats have been quite good at finding those communities and working with them and being the third option, if I may say that. May not be the third option for many people, might be the first option for some people. But looking at selection process and looking at personalities and people winning candidates, how do you think that the Liberal Democrats have done that differently in particular areas? Or have they done it differently?
Well, we've been very open. We encourage people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, to apply to be candidates. And we have a program within the party where we, especially women, people who are disabled, people from black and minority ethnics, are actually given the extra support to ensure that we have a wide representation, both locally in our council seats and nationally as well. Not always had the best of success in the world, and I admit that. But in terms of the party, the Liberal Democrats have been very clear that we want people from all walks of life, and support will be given to those individuals who want to be candidates and who want to fight for the Liberal Democrats.
In particular, when we talk about seats and overall in terms of there's been almost I think that a better analysis of winning seats in terms of getting the right candidate. How you two people, in terms of that process, do you believe that is a fair and open process? All parties will say, just as Cameron said from the Liberal Democrats, that we have an open policy, we have a fair policy, we have positive action. We want people who may have a disability to be welcomed and acknowledged and part of that in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation, if I may say that on this particular channel. That all parties will say that we have an open, fair policy. Do you actually believe that we're at that stage where we can say that it's making a difference?
Definitely here in Pendle, in terms of the Conservative Party, which I can mention from my own personal experience, we had a process of selecting candidates for the local election, which we've just had, and the Barrowford and Pendleside ward, which was a new ward because we've had boundary changes here in Pendle. The Barrowford area and Pendleside is considered to be traditionally a safe Conservative area, where I don't think another, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think another ethnic minority person has ever stood. And when I put my name forward, there was scepticism amongst some voices I was hearing in the community saying, oh, you've put your name forward, you won't get selected, they don't want somebody with your background there, which I totally disagree with. My name went into the hat.
Background, you mean by your colour of your skin?
Not necessarily in terms of where I'm from, and because I live in Nelson rather than Barrowford. Okay. So I think a number of reasons behind it why people felt possibly the Conservative Party here in Pendle wouldn't select me, but that is totally, it's clearly shown that is totally incorrect. The process is fair. It's a system which does encourage people from every background to come forward and put their name into the hat. And then obviously there's a selection process, which is a fair system, and they choose who they believe will be the right candidate for a particular seat.
Something that also came out yesterday, and Cameron, if you want to comment on this as well, because we've got him, so we might as well make good use of him from Yorkshire. Yesterday we heard about Khalid Mahmood and his resignation. If I can come to you first, County Councillor, on that. Do you have any more information on what that resignation was about? I mean, I got that information quite later on. I've not really seen anything much about it. So do we know what that resignation was about? To
be honest with you, I've heard in passing that he's resigned from being the shadow defence spokesperson in the Labour front bench, but that's all I've heard. So I've not heard any more. but it'd be interesting to see what the reasons are behind him stepping down.
Yeah,
from that
Cameron, I won't ask the Conservatives at the moment, but Cameron, have you heard anything? Have you got any inside information about Khalid Mahmood and his resignation?
Well, I don't have any inside information. I don't think the Labour Party will be sharing inside information with the Liberal Democrats. But I must say, I'm surprised by the timing of his resignation. There have been many issues over the last few weeks and months where I would have expected more resignations from the Labour Party from bench haven't taken place. And then it seems like when the ship is sinking, if I can use those terms, people are jumping out, and as Khalid Mahmood realised that the Labour Party is a sinking ship, so it's about time I better jump rather than go down with the ship as such.
And is that down to one of the things that we spoke about yesterday was issues around leadership? The fact that Sir Keir Starmer has been there for more than 12 months. If you look at what's been happening over the last few months, and in particular, a reference was made to the iftar dinner, the dates. Early on, when Sir Keir Starmer came in, we had a lot of coverage around the issue of Kashmir. I know that Khalid Mahmood himself is a stern campaigner for Kashmir. Do you think your own, and I'm asking you to think out loud now, because you don't have any concrete answers, I'm assuming. Now, do you think all these factors are now going to make more of a difference in terms of the shadow cabinet and prominent figures within the Labour Party? I just want to get Cameron's take on it, we'll come back to Azhar.
Well, I like to think there are principled people within the Labour Party who will stand up for issues like Kashmir, who will stand up for issues like Palestine, and who will have the guts to say to their leader, look, for whatever reason, you shouldn't be pulling out of iftars. We should be encouraging diversity. We should be working with all across communities and not be pushed or steered in one particular direction. Yes, he wants to become the Prime Minister, but certainly we must have politicians who are principled. And you know what? A government needs effective opposition. And I think Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have actually failed in giving the opposition to Boris Johnson and the Conservative government. And if they failed, I think it's time that they stepped aside and allowed somebody else to have the real opposition that this country deserves.
Okay. Without actually talking about the reasons why Khalid Mahmood has resigned, because none of us have that information, and I think it would be wrong to give the wrong impression out to the viewers. On that particular note, County Councillor, has Sir Keir Starmer failed as a leader in terms of looking at diversity, in terms of looking at taking the party in a particular direction?
I think there's a number of things. I think I just want to pick up Cameron's point about a sinking ship. The Labour Party isn't a sinking ship. If Khalid Mahmood had joined the Lib Dems, I would have been really shocked and horrified that he'd made that jump. I think there's a number of things. Keir Starmer became leader, and very shortly after that, we entered the pandemic and the various lockdowns we've had. He's tried to be a constructive leader of the opposition, and I think in a national crisis, it's imperative on all politicians of all parties to work together and trying to work together in a way that it steers the country out of the difficulties it's had.
But has he succeeded? He's tried to be.
Yeah, I think 12 months. These 12 months have been very difficult for the country. They've been very difficult for any opposition as well. And I think the next, the sort of election results haven't been good for the Labour Party. And in parts, apart from West England and a number of other places like in Pendle in County where we made some gains, it's been very poor. And Keir's now got to actually come out with a policy platform and say, this is what I stand for, this is what I represent. But what I do disagree with is two things. Number one, in terms of Kashmir, Keir Starmer's policy, and I think he needs to shout more about this and talk openly about his views on Palestine. I'm Vice Chair of Labour Friends of Kashmir. Lord Wajid Khan is the national convener, and Wasim Zafar from Birmingham is the secretary. We've had a number of meetings with Lisa Nandy, Stephen Kinnock, and Keir Starmer on these issues on Kashmir, and he's very clear as a human rights lawyer that he wants to stand up for human rights. It doesn't matter whether in Kashmir or in China or anywhere else. He wants to stand up for human rights and a very clear policy of self-determination. And it's up to us as the Labour movement and the leadership to actually express that out in the community.
Right at the beginning, County Councillor, when Sir Keir Starmer came up as an actual candidate, for leadership. One of the things that was highlighted was the fact that he is a human rights especially so the fact that he has that background, he has that experience. There was an expectation, wasn't there, from certain pockets of the community, in particular the Kashmiri diaspora, or all those people that believed in the cause and were pushing the cause, and we all had that expectation. Would you? But just now, just a few minutes ago, one of the things that you said is that you said that you would agree that he perhaps needs to shout out a little bit louder. Why does he need to be reminded of that from his particular background? And the people that voted him in, Labour members and obviously people that were supporting Labour, saw that as a plus point, didn't they, for him in wanting him to be a leader. Has he not delivered that?
I think it's a case of making sure that you get your view across. And I think those opportunities haven't been there. He's not made any international policy statements. But like I said, Lisa Nandy is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Stephen Kinnock is in her team. And they've made it very clear what their views are on Kashmir. They've written to the Indian High Commission. They've written to Prime Minister Modi about the atrocities in Jammu Kashmir, occupied Jammu Kashmir, right, and about what's going on there. They've also, Lisa Nandy has been very vocal about the Muslims in China and the atrocities and the genocide that's going on there. So that's very clear. I've been on a Zoom call because of the pandemic with Keir Starmer and Wasim Zafar from Birmingham and Lord Wajid Khan. And he's made it very clear to the executive of LFK that our policy in Kashmir is self-determination, right? And he's also made representations to the Indians around what's going on. So I think it's clear. I think sometimes you need to make it very clear, make a speech on that issue and get that out so that people are aware of it, and that's very important. But when I compare that to actually the current government and the fact that Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab haven't condemned the atrocities, and I think it's important that whichever political party we're on, it's not about ding dong between, say, me and Nadeem and Kamran, but us to work collectively across political parties to apply pressure in our respective areas to say, in the Conservatives, Nadeem does that work, Kamran does that work in the Lib Dems, and that we work to make sure that these issues are mainstreamed. If the Labour Party doesn't take Kashmir seriously, they will feel the repercussions of that, because from its membership, from the councillors, and from its members of Parliament.
If I can come to you just before the break, one of the things that has come back, Councillor Nadeem, is the fact that this word "listened to," that we need to listen more. It's been said over and over again, is that communities don't feel that they've been listened to. We've always said that, but what seems to be different now in terms of are they being listened to, and who is doing the listening? Is it the candidates? Is it the party? Overall, you're all, both of you work within certain groups within your party. You've got certain responsibilities. You're leaders within those groups, or is it actual leadership that is listening?
I think ultimately, here on a local level, it's us elected members who have to listen to our local residents, and it's our duty to listen to the residents and take their voice into the council chamber and raise that and argue for the reasons and the things that the residents want us to do. Sometimes what is happening is residents are raising issues or saying certain things which are not really being raised in the council chamber, let alone dealt with.
Why are they not being raised? Is it because people are not taking it seriously, or is it the way it's coming across, or is it the fact that what they're raising isn't relevant?
No, I think everything residents say should be relevant, and we should listen to everything residents have to say. And the important issues need to be raised by us as elected members. I think sometimes it's about strategy, it's about what policies particular parties have, and perhaps sometimes the policies come before the residents, and I think that's wrong. And I think it should always be about residents first, policy second, because I think it's the residents who should be dictating what policies a particular political party should have and which direction a particular party should go in.
Okay, we are coming 1 minute towards the commercial break, but I just want to get Cameron in before he actually leaves us. You being a regional chair for the Liberal Democrats, and you listened to our two colleagues here, How do you feel when somebody says to you that they're not being listened to, and it's all about local politics as opposed to policies within that particular area? You being somebody from a different particular party, how would you do that differently to actually make that difference?
I think there's 2 points, 2 quick points, if I may make. The first is politicians have a responsibility to listen to the electorate. The difficulty you've got is when people are parachuted in to particular locations, or if politicians think that their seats are safe seats, then there has been a tendency to kind of ignore the electorate and turn up just on the election day and just pick up the votes. And I think sometimes with the current political system we have and the current voting system we have, it allows certain politicians in certain areas to ignore residents, but yet somehow still manage to win. And until we change the political voting system, you'll continue to have politicians who do turn up, who do get parachuted into seats, and who kind of ignore residents for a very long time, but yet manage to win come the election day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that input. I'm going to come back to you two quickly before we actually go to the commercial break. Parachuted to actual seat. I'm assuming we're referring back to selection process and those people that are being elected. Thank you again, Cameron, for joining. We are going to go to a commercial break, and something I do want to sort of ponder on, and I want the viewers to actually think about, and let's see what answers we come back with, is this word about reforms and the reforms that we need to have in terms of the selection process and overall politically. So we are going to go to a commercial break. I've put that a question as a ponder, or that thought as a ponder. Let's go to a commercial break, and straight after that break we'll come back with some more results and continue our conversation about the elections in 2021 across the country. Thank you.
Robert, Labour Party, 1,060. Ruther Michael, Conservative Party candidate, 3,354. Purcell Jennifer, Conservative Party candidate, 3,649. Wick J. Michael Baxter, Liberal Democrat, 3,103. Wick Thomas James Dingleby, Liberal Democrat, 2,236. Wood Jane Veronica Bales, Green Party, 838. There were 67 rejected ballot papers. The turnout was 36.22%, and I hereby declare that Michael Goulthorpe and Jennifer Purcell are duly elected.
Yes, being elected for Pendle Rural for the County Council is an honour and a privilege, I've got to say. We've got the largest division in Lancashire, 22,000 people out there, and Jennifer Purcell and myself are going to work very hard for all the communities and groups within that over the coming 4 years.
Well, today is the Pendle Rural casting vote for my constituencies, and 4 years ago I got in on 2018, 2019, on January 19 I died. I came back and was in hospital for 12 months, but I still continued my work from my hospital bed. And then now elections have come. I mean, Pendle Rural is quite a big area, but we need more investment for our roads. We must do that, and we must need more money for the hospitals and the nursing staff, and also the care homes, because now more people are getting older, and that's what I've canvassed for more policing. We need more policing to stop all these antisocial behaviour and boy races. But I'm over the moon, and it's higher than what I got last time. But I want to thank everybody in Barnoldswick, Earbicone and Pendle Rural. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, well, I'm disappointed with the results, obviously. Conservatives have a majority. Over the last few years we've done our very best for the people of Pendle, and we hope the Conservatives will continue to do so in the future, and we'll be using our position on the council to make sure that everything's done to the best, really. I think we've suffered because of a national surge, vaccination programme, the emphasis by the Conservatives on national issues rather than local issues. So we're determined to carry on fighting, and we'll be doing our very best in the future.
For each candidate is as follows: Aslam Mohammed, the Conservative Party candidate, 2,638. Iqbal Mohammed, Labour Party, 3,914. Marty Annette Irene, Green Party, 210. Thomas Mary Elizabeth, Liberal Democrat, 174. There were 85 spoiled papers and the turnout was 55.66%. And I hereby declare that Mohammed Iqbal is duly elected.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart those people that have supported me during this campaign. Alhamdulillah, with a record vote across the county, almost 4,000, I think, has sent a clear message to the Conservatives here in Briarfield and Nelson West that their divisive politics has failed. But I'm proud of being re-elected to the Lancashire County Council, and inshallah I will continue the hard work that I've done for the last 4 years. But doubling my majority is clearly a credit to the community that has put me in this position. Alhamdulillah.
We've had excellent results here today in Pendle for the County Council elections. County Councillor Mohammed Iqbal increased it, almost doubled his majority today from 700 to 1,300. I also kept my majority over 1,000 votes, and that sends a strong message to the community in Pendle that Labour has held its strongholds. We've increased our majorities, and it clearly demonstrates that we were working for the local community. Of course, you can't fight a national current on the back of the vaccination bounce for the Conservatives, but here in Pendle we've held our own, and where our seats are, we've retained the seats, and we've increased our majorities, which is brilliant news for local people.
Absolutely delighted here in Pendle that the Conservative Party have taken control of Pendle Borough Council. Previously the council was being run by a coalition of Labour and Liberal Democrats administration, so we've made fantastic gains here. Our candidates, our team, all the helpers, and most of all our supporters have been out and voted for our candidates all across Pendle. Really grateful to each and every one of you. So fantastic gain. Now it's time to deliver and represent the local community, listening to our residents and doing what's best for them.
Robert, Labour Party, 1,060. Ruthlov Michael, Conservative Party candidate, 3,354. Purcell Jennifer, Conservative Party candidate, 3,649. Whip David Michael Baxter, Liberal Democrat, 3,103. Whip Thomas James Dingleby, Liberal Democrat, 2,236. Wood Jane Veronica Bales, Green Party, 838. There were 67 rejected ballot papers. The turnout was 36.22%, and I hereby declare that Michael Goulthor and Jennifer Purcell are duly elected.
Yes, being elected for Pendle Rural for the County Council is an honour and a privilege, I've got to say. We've got the largest division in Lancashire, 22,000 people out there, and Jennifer Purcell and myself are going to work very hard for all the communities and groups within that over the coming 4 years.
Well, today is the Pendle Rural casting vote for my constituencies, and 4 years ago I got in on 2018, 2019, on January 19 I died. I came back and was in hospital for 12 months, but I still continued my work from my hospital bed. And then the now elections have come. I mean, Pendle Rural is quite a big area, but we need more investment for our roads. We must do that, and we must need more money for the hospitals and the nursing staff, and also the care homes, because now more people are getting older.
Welcome back to Election Special 2021. We are going to do a little bit of a spin on it, and obviously we're all sat here, we happen to be from a particular diaspora, being Pakistani. I'm assuming that you've all got a Pakistani origin. I wasn't going to say Pakistani passport because we're all British here, but we're talking about parachuting in, and Cameron has actually enjoyed it so much from Yorkshire. He's staying with us in Lancashire, so we're going to bring him in as well. Parachuting people in to seats because of their background, as in not because they're barristers or solicitors or teachers and are triple graduates, but because that face or that ethnicity fits that community. Is that a good thing? Let's start with you.
I think my personal view is I think it should be the local person for the local job. The person who lives in the local area should really be representing that community, because that person, he or she will really understand what the issues are, what the concerns of the public are. And I think that person is best fit to represent those views and raise them at the appropriate level. On the other hand, if you've said in terms of parachuting somebody in, if you bring someone from outside the area, might have come from a really affluent sort of posh area, coming to say a working class area, will not really understand what the local concerns and what the issues are. Or the other way around, exactly. Exactly. Won't really understand what the issues are. So I think it's not necessarily a good thing in my view, but it doesn't always work that way. I think sometimes, depending on what's happening in a particular area, for example, there might be a particular area which has had local representation, but that local representation has failed to represent the residents. Sometimes it does need change, sometimes it does need fresh ideas and new people, or fresh face into a particular area. As long as then that person carries on that job diligently, it's not necessarily always a bad thing in my view.
County Councillor Azza, would you say that fitting the face within that community, do you think that's more important politically than actually finding the right person for the job?
I think finding the right person for the job is important, is the most important issue here. You can try to be politically correct, you can try and find a face to fit, and that might win you that election. I've experienced myself, you know, as leader of the Labour group on the County Council. I was leader of Pendle Council before, and been involved in politics for 30 odd years, that, you know, where we've lost seats because we've not fitted the right face. But I think at the end of the day, I don't regret that, because we made the right decision, and in the end the community itself realises that the person that they elected was the wrong person. I think it's important that people are competent, they have the right skill sets, and they have that passion for changing community. It shouldn't be electing councillors because they want a badge in the community that I'm a councillor. You know, you've seen the Citizen Khan, you know, everyone knows me. Unfortunately, I don't think that attitude has to change. We need competent people, and that will make sure that we'll get more people coming forward for all political parties who want to make a difference in their community.
I mean, we're going to bring Cameron in this because actually you're the one that actually threw this in, parachuted to seats. Everybody knowing me, does that make me or that person the right person for the job? And I want to actually put a little bit of a spin on this. Within certain particular groups and communities, getting people from a particular ethnic background, let's say a Pakistani background, we all happen to be from a particular background here. Do you think that parties have actually learnt this trick and are putting people in, parachuting people in, because they know they're going to win elections and they actually don't give a damn what happens next?
I think it's really important that the individual that the party selects has to be the right candidate for the job. Because look, ultimately, whether you're a councillor, you're a member of parliament, or whatever else you may well be, you've got a job to do, and that is to serve the people that you want to represent. Now, if you can't do that properly, it doesn't matter how many people in the community actually know you or how much respect you think people actually want to give you. Because in any other job, if the candidate is not the right candidate, then that person should not be selected. And in politics, it should be not different. Politics is about serving the public. Having the right candidate, that is the
What
first
is the right candidate? Because as far as selectors are concerned, and as far as the party is concerned, they want to win, don't they? They don't care if they're tall or small or fat or beautiful or ugly or male or female or Azur or Nadeem or Cameron. They don't care. They want. I'm putting this to you. I'm saying to you, they don't care. They want a win. And we're seeing more and more of the Pakistani politics of Britain, if I even may throw that in, that we're seeing more, they don't care. They want to see a win. And we've got some wins here. Labour holds Bradford and Labour holds Slough. So we're actually getting results through. I'm saying to you, Cameron, and I'm saying it to all three of you, what you're saying sounds right. You're saying the right things. You're not going to get into trouble when you go home. No one's going to send you a message from the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats to say what you said wasn't politically correct there. But they don't really care, do they, Cameron?
Well, I think they ought to care. And certainly within the Liberal Democrats, we are very good in trying to bring forward candidates from a wide range of backgrounds. And ultimately, when you're looking for a right candidate, you want the candidate who is willing to work for the community that he or she wants to represent. And that ultimately has the forefront of the issues. Somebody who wants to put the work in and who wants to actually do the job.
Okay, so talking about doing the job and actually coming in to do the job, we've got an interesting clip I've just been told from my sound team. It's actually a Conservative lady who actually has come back from a little bit further than we think, perhaps parachuted back to a seat. Let's have a watch of this clip. I've not seen this before.
Today is the Pendle Rural casting vote for my constituencies, and 4 years ago I got in on 2018, 2019, on January 19 I died. I came back and was in hospital for 12 months, but I still continued my work from my hospital bed. And then now elections have come. I mean, Pendle Rural is quite a big area, but we need more investment for our roads. We must do that, and we must need more money for the hospitals and the nursing staff and also the care homes, because now more people are getting older, and that's what I've canvassed for more policing. We need more policing to stop all these antisocial behaviour and boy races. But I'm over the moon, and it's higher than what I got last time. But I want to thank everybody in Barnoldswick, Earbicone and Pendle Rural. Thank you.
I don't know if you actually caught that, but this lady actually died in January, and then she came back.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I think
when you talk about passion,
yes, yeah,
believing in the cause.
I don't think she meant it literally. I think she was quite poorly. She was seriously in hospital for quite a long time, and yes, it was a matter of, is she going to make it through? Is she going to pull through? It was that serious with Jennifer, and luckily she did pull through. And here we see her. She was in a wheelchair for quite a long time. She was bedridden. So I think she's done well to get back and come back as a council and get re-elected.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I've actually watched his clips for the first time, but the sound boys were having a bit of a giggle in the background. But the fact that she is so passionate and she actually, they wanted to air it, because words are taken, aren't they, for literal meanings. And I want to come back to this thing about decisions made by parties. You happen to be two Asian males. I wouldn't say there's a massive difference between your ages, but there is some difference between your experience. You happen to be from a particular country. You're both of Muslim origin. Your families are, in terms of, so there hasn't been a big change in terms of the dynamics of your families, and you're both involved in politics. We haven't got Ruby. Ruby's not been able to join us, unfortunately. Sorry, viewers. Unfortunately, I can imagine that she's been under a lot of stress, and physically, I think she's probably just shattered, and will be fasting. So unfortunately, she can't come in. So she's not able to answer that. Why is it that we're still seeing that people from a particular background are being put into seats, encouraged into seats, but there still seems to be a gap from females? There still seems to be a gap if you've not had that kind of grooming into politics. Would you agree that that still is the case?
I think in terms of going back to the parachuting point, I think ultimately it is a job interview. When you are on the selection panel, we were talking about the selection process earlier. I think it is about selecting the right person for the right job. And the panel try and select, I think you're right in the point that they want to select the right person for the right job, the person who's going to be able to
But what is the
deliver.
right person? How do they determine that? What sort of list do they have other than... we've already determined that they don't have to even speak English. They don't even have to. They don't even have to put a sentence. I mean, when I say be able to speak basics, hello, how are you? Yes, my name is. But if you ask them to put a paragraph together or even a written piece together, then their literacy and numeracy levels, there is no minimum criteria, is there?
There isn't. Yeah, there isn't.
So what is that? What is that list?
I think, for example, in terms of parachuting, some people will argue I've been parachuted into another ward where I've just stood and won the election. So that's the argument that's been made with me. I wouldn't normally fit the image of the traditional person who would stand in that particular area. But I think the party have decided that this person, with his experience, with his knowledge, it is local still, because it is still within Pendle and it's a throwaway from where I live. And the party felt that I was the right person to stand in that particular ward. So I think it is having the right person, and it's a judgment, isn't it? When people go for a job interview, you don't always make the right decision. The employer might not necessarily employ who they felt was the right person, because giving an interview is a different thing, or looking on a person's CV sometimes. If someone has got a proven track record of working for the local area, working hard, I think that is ultimately the best person for the job.
I've got some, we're still keeping an eye on what's happening with the mayoral election. Sadiq Khan, 40% of the vote bank at the moment, and Sean Bailey, 38%. A very, very close call so far. The results will be expected later tonight. We're also waiting, 5 other areas are also waiting for their results. Just on this note, I mean, we talk about personalities and we talk about the best person for the job. Sadiq Khan, when he came in, and his background got looked into by not just nationally, internationally. Him from his sort of working class background, his education, together with his family background, his ethnicity, his, I mean, gender probably wasn't much of an issue in terms of, but also his faith background, all that looked. Do you think that's a fair cop when we talk about how people are judged and judgment calls are made in selection processes?
Listen, I worked for Sadiq Khan for a couple of years as his advisor. I know that Sadiq Khan is a mainstream politician. He comes from Karachi. His family were migrants to Karachi, and you know, he's worked hard. And he's never made issue of the fact that his father was a bus driver and he's from a working class background. However, Sadiq also, I think, rightly recognised that even though London is a lot more cosmopolitan, you know, any one of us three, if we ended up in London and whichever political party we stood for, it's a very different community compared to the communities, let's say, in Lancashire or parts of Yorkshire. Sadiq has not been afraid of scrutiny, and he's been a mainstream politician. I think that's the important thing for me. You know, we cannot be Pakistani or Kashmiri politicians. We have to be mainstream British politicians. Yes, we have the advantage that we are of Pakistani Kashmiri heritage, and that's important, and we understand those communities. We have a better understanding of communities than our white counterparts. But at the same time, we represent all the communities. So in my division, I represent 12,500 voters. You know, more than 50% of those are non-Muslim, non-Asian people. In Nadeem's area, there'll be very few. There's, you know, probably 100, 200 Muslims. The rest of them are from rural communities, you know, farmers and all the rest of it. So it's very diverse communities. I think that's important. But going back to your point about selections, you know, in the Labour Party, you have to go through a selection process, and you put your name forward, and then it's the members in that particular locality that decides if you're a candidate. So we've been trying for 5-6 years now. We've had Yasmin Qureshi, we've had Naz Shah, Shabana Mood here in Pendle, trying to talk to some of the women to try and encourage them to stand for elections. And it's been a long, difficult process. But we now have women coming forward in Saudi Bashir, in Ruby Anwar, and that, I think, is a success story, because I remember at the polling station when women were coming in to vote, they made a beeline for Ruby because they could converse with her, they could talk to her, they could relate to her. They'd be much more hesitant about coming to me than if they were going to Ruby. And I think if you want everyone in the community to be represented, you've got to have a diverse group of candidates who reflect the community that you want to serve.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you brought this question in and or made the comment in terms of parachuted seats, do you think, Cameron, that we pick and choose when we want to celebrate our ethnicity or our gender or our Pakistanness or our background? Do you think that we pick and choose that as candidates, as people, to get the people to vote for us? Because quite rightly, as County Councillor has said, the people in terms of who are involved in that process, the members are the ones that select the candidate. So who are those members, and are we actually making those members so that we can be selected?
When I stood as the candidate at the general election on the last occasion, it was a seat called Leeds North West. And the Liberal Democrat membership who selected me as their candidates, nearly 99% were from white, middle class or working class background. So if I went there and said, look, please vote for me or select me because I'm a Pakistani person, that would have been a non-starter. I'm proud that the party actually chose me, the membership chose me on my merit, on my ability to do the job, and not because I was from a particular race, religion, background, or whatever else it may be. So I think it's one good thing to be proud of where you are from, and I'm actually proud of who I am. But at the same time, I always will argue, look, select me or elect me if you think I'm the right person, I'm the best person for the job, and not just because I've come from a particular village or a particular city, or because my family are connected with certain people. So I think we ought to be very clear that it's good to celebrate our background, but ultimately it's a job to be done, and it has to be the right candidate to do that job.
So how much relevant is it then, if I may open this up? I wouldn't say it's sad that you're all male. It's nice that you're all male. But the fact that we don't have a female here, is how relevant is it to bring up your gender or your ethnicity or your faith background in that process? Or when you're out there, when you're speaking to people, or does it become irrelevant and does it become invisible? If we're honest, at the doorstep that you're talking about, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that you're not white? It's pretty obvious that you're, other than that, it's not, other than that, and it's obvious that you're male, but no one really knows until you start talking and talk about yourself, maybe what your faith background is, or where you come from in Pakistan, or if it happens to be Pakistan. They're not going to know that straight away, are they?
They're not going to, but I don't think that's relevant. I think it's all about how you, for example, when you're knocking on doors and you're meeting people, meeting your local residents, it's about you as a person, how you come across, whether you understand the issues, how you listen to that person when they raise their concerns on the doorstep, and how you come across. And I think
because those issues, Councillor Nadeem, if I may come in there, are not relevant, are not different, are they? Whether you happen to be Asian or happen to be black or whatever ethnic background or gender, if your bins are not being picked up and your streets are not being cleaned, and there's always a water leak in the next street, and there's loads of traffic, or there's a high number of deaths because of road traffic accidents, all those relevant issues, it doesn't really matter where you're from, does it?
I agree, absolutely. It doesn't make absolutely no difference whatsoever. So I think it shouldn't be relevant in any of that political debate, in my view. I think it's about delivering for the residents and listening to them and raising the concerns. So yes, I agree in terms of the selection process and who is selected, but I think ultimately is in terms of the political party, the process are slightly different. and I don't believe any of them political selection processes are perfect. There's always room for improvement in every political party. For example, in our party, the selection process is by a certain committee who decide who a particular candidate is going to be. For example, as I said, in the Labour Party, it's the members. So in terms of them, you could pick out flaws. For example, in terms of the membership, you could say, well, if I'm a candidate and I know the local members, they're more likely to vote for me, you're more likely to influence them, you can canvass them members.
Yeah, but also you can make members. Also, you can make members just so that they can vote you in.
Exactly.
So I'm going to stand for an election in 6 months' time, and I make sure that my uncle and auntie and Masi and Jaji and Mawa and Mami and Mami and Mawa and their Patriye, whatever they're called, I'm using the right words, all of them are members. If they're 18, I want them to become a member because I'm going to stand for election. And and if I've got any narazgi or I've got any problems with them, I sort it out. I sort the brotherly politics to get sorted out. That's members, isn't it?
That's members. So precisely that's the point I'm making, that there's no system, I don't believe, which is perfect. That is, the members can be influenced, like you've just pointed out. Whereas, for example, one may argue in terms of the Conservative Party process, it's a certain committee, and if I know the members on the committee or are more well known rather than a new face, they're more likely possibly to vote for me, or they might have some personality clash with me, might not vote for me.
I was just going to say, on a committee, then you, I'm assuming that there's a smaller number of people who make that decision. And if you've not got on with them, I'm just going to read something out. If you've not got on with them or annoyed them or don't know them, then that can have an influence. The Scottish National Party is swiped in Scotland. And I'm going to talk about the referendum in a minute and any views on Nicola Sturgeon and how that's going to be. I think Boris Johnson did say yesterday that he didn't want another referendum, or there wasn't going to be another referendum. So just to finish off this point in terms of the politics behind the politics and being people from a different particular background. We mentioned the Kashmir issue as becoming, for some pockets of the community, is more of an issue. And I'm not just saying for Kashmiris, I'm just saying in terms of human rights and human rights activists and those people that are fighting for lots of different causes, not just because they come from that particular area, but because they believe in the cause. So does that matter then in terms of your personality and in that decision-making process? And if you don't fit the bill, what can you do about it?
I mean, there is an appeal process if you feel you haven't been treated rightly. Like, for example, when you go for a job interview, if you feel you've been discriminated against, there are legal process that you can go through.
But how would you know? Because they're not going to say to you, are they? They're not going to say, oh, I don't, you know what, I'm not going to choose you because I don't like you. You wear glasses. So I don't like people that wear glasses. And I don't really like your hairstyle. They're not going to say that.
No.
And you know, I'm not quite sure because you don't look as strong, you know, as county councillor.
I think you're stretching a bit far, to be honest, but I don't think it goes that far. I don't think it's that bad as you're making it out to be, and we don't give the wrong impression to our viewers as to what's going on in local politics.
I'm having a bit of a banter there.
Yes, you are.
I'm waking them
up. I know you are. So I think, I mean, like I said, there's good and bad in all political parties, and there's more we can do. You just mentioned in terms of the Kashmir issue, in terms of whether political parties need to do more, and yes, all political parties, I think we all need to do more. And in terms of Palestine, what's going on there, I think we need to, well, again, all of us collectively, from our different political backgrounds, need to put pressure on our elected members, our MPs, and ask them to raise their voices, because it shouldn't really be an issue about whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. I think it's just about fellow human beings.
I'm going to give you the results in terms of what's happening in Scotland. The Scottish National Party, 60, Conservatives have got 5, Liberal Democrats have got 4, and Labour 2. At the moment, I mean, those results, it seems, I mean, unless something really drastic happens, it seems to be that we've got a fair picture. But there, come in there, County Councillor. I know that you wanted to say a few things in there in terms of people that are representing and how that process is. But I want you to actually think about that when it actually comes to the issue of nationalism and the issue of referendum and representation. You can see where I'm going on this with that. So what's your and then we'll come, in terms of particular, let's concentrate a little bit more about Scotland. But please do make your views.
I think in terms of what Nadeem is saying, I think whether it's members or committees who are selecting people, you do need to make sure that the right people are in the right positions. In terms of what's happening in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, I think when Blair and Donald Dewar came up with the Scottish Parliament idea, I don't think they ever thought that there'd be a day where the Scottish nationalists would be in such a big majority. And it looks like the Scottish nationalists could have outright majority in the Scottish Parliament. If that is the case, I think the whole point of devolution is that you give people the opportunity at a local level to make decisions. You devolve those decisions to a local level.
Why is Labour doing so bad? And why is it that even now, we've got somebody who's the son of Governor Server, who's been there, and he's done a fantastic campaign, and Anas is there. And why is it that they haven't made that difference? Because if we go back to that right at the beginning of our conversation, traditionally, Labour supporters and voters are people from a particular working class background who really want to make a difference. Their lives are affected by politics, perhaps I would say on a day-to-day local basis more than anything, and it still isn't making a difference, and it seems to be going from bad to worse for Labour there.
I think Labour's been going in the wrong direction for a number of years now in Scotland, and that's why we've lost seat after seat after seat and leader after leader after leader. But one thing I can say about Anas is that he's only been the leader for 10 weeks.
Yes.
Right, and in that 10 weeks, he's injected a lot of energy and passion into the debates. He's brought a lot of energy and passion into the campaign. And he's not a leader just for 10 weeks. He's a leader now, I hope, for in the next 4 years, where he can build that Labour brand, change the direction of travel, and make that difference. And I think Anas will do that. And I think when we see the top-up lists and we see some of the other results come in, he'll hold, as long as he can hold his own, he'll build on that.
Because if you look at his political grooming, because I want to try and make some links, some of our viewers are from Pakistan. He is the son of a governor of Punjab, Governor Server. His father was the first elected MP, Muslim MP. If you look at that journey and if you look at that political grooming, then he, as a political person in his own right, has had that background, hasn't he? He understands the dynamics. He comes from a family who know what it's like to be hit hard, who go back in and campaign. He understands that. And 10 weeks, and it has been, and I'm glad you've mentioned that, it has only been 10 weeks since we've had new leadership for the Labour Party. But was that a wise decision? So close coming up to these elections?
I think I know this quite well, and I know he's grappled with this issue. Was this the right time for him to become a leader of the Labour Party when he previously just stepped down shortly before the elections? And I suppose there's never a right time to be leader, and you've got to take risks in politics. Some pay off, some don't. He knew that he's not going to win this election. It's about making sure that he actually stops the erosion of the Labour vote and then builds on that. I think the next few years will show that. I think you're absolutely right. Anas has the experience of being a member of Parliament because he took over his father, Jolly Server, after he stepped down, and then he, became an MSP. So he's understands the Scottish Parliament and understands Westminster politics and actually the international politics and the issue there. I think one thing which I just want to pick up that Nadeem said, what's going on at Al-Aqsa over the last 48 hours is absolutely atrocious. And this is one of those positions where, whether you are Muslim or non-Muslim, people should be standing up for the rights of the Palestinians. I've been to Palestine, with Sayyid Awasi, in fact, in 2005. And when you walk through the Jaffa Gate into the old part of East or Jerusalem, you cannot tell the difference between that person there who's in a jubba and a head cloak and someone else in trousers and a t-shirt. You don't know which is a Muslim and which is a non-Muslim, right? Because they all live together. The Christians and Muslims live together side by side. And what I find shocking is that the Christian world has forgotten the Palestinians. They've forgotten the Christian community that exists there. And the Muslim countries have forgotten about the Muslims that live there. And if we don't unite, there will be, another, well, I hope not, a genocide, because the Palestinians are being driven out of their homes. They're being starved to death. The water's been taken away from them. And I think as Muslims and as human beings, we have a duty to stand up for these communities and to actually say to our government, our British government, whichever political colour it is, it happens to be Boris Johnson, to say, look, enough is enough, stand up to Israel, stop these atrocities.
I think, like you said, overnight this morning, we've been hearing about this and what's happening in Al-Aqsa, and I know in terms of the casualties and everyone, and we must condemn what has happened there, whoever is responsible behind that. Being the ruling party and somebody that's just been elected, how much of that do you face locally, when, in terms of representation, the voice, the political genre and political correctness when it comes to human rights and atrocities that are happening internationally?
Yeah. I just received a call a few hours before I came here from a local resident who raised his concerns about the issue in Palestine with me and asked me to specifically raise the issue with our local MP, which I will do. And like I said, I think it's a duty upon all of us and all political parties. Is enough being done? That's the question. I genuinely believe from all political parties that not enough is being done. Because this isn't a political issue where we should be saying one leader is doing one thing, or Boris Johnson not doing this, or Keir Starmer's not. I genuinely say this. I believe all of them need to work collectively and do more for this cause in Kashmir, in Palestine, in Burma, and anywhere across the world where there's human rights abuses taking place. We shouldn't be selecting where we get involved or try and influence the process there and choose not to, or choose to stay out of it in certain other areas. And I think that's totally wrong.
Cameron, I'm going to bring you back in. You are in Yorkshire Humberside, and I know that there are some very stern campaigners in terms of human rights. We've heard lots of political rhetoric coming out of that particular area. One of the things I want to ask you, it's very easy for political people to talk about not enough is being done, but what would you say needs to be done in terms of the honesty behind the politics when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to what's happening in Burma, what's happening in China, what's happening any one of those countries, and if I can also bring Saudi Arabia into this in more recent years, what do you believe needs to happen?
Well, I think generally human rights abuses anywhere in the world must be first and foremost condemned, and I think all political parties are kind of in agreement on that. But I think the government has a responsibility when they are speaking to governments of other countries. For example, if you take India as an example, when Boris Johnson meets his counterpart, then he not only needs to say to his counterpart that this should not be happening, he should also back it up with ensuring that restrictions are put in place. For example, what we shouldn't be happening is where trade deals are seen more important than human rights abuses. And I think one of the dangers that we currently have in this current Brexit climate is where our government is trying to negotiate and reach agreements with countries over trade, especially when we've left the European Union. I think there's a real danger that human rights abuses will be overlooked and questions will not be asked because our government will not want to upset their counterparts, and discussions about human rights abuses will not take place. So condemning it is one thing, but we've got to follow it with action. And unless our government takes a lead on that, then all it becomes is a token shop on TV channels.
How much of that is a political judgment call? Because in terms of the business behind politics, as opposed to the politics behind politics, and then you've got the human rights elements as well. How much of those judgment calls are actually in the hands of the cabinet and ministers, and then that filters out in terms of the regional level and right down to local level, where councillors have been asked that question at the doorstep? How much can people influence that?
I think councillors, and Councillor Nadeem was quite right to point out earlier on, have a responsibility to relate to their member of parliaments, look, the people on our street, the people in our communities are actually concerned about this, and the member of parliaments then have a responsibility to relay that information to the cabinet, to the government, or the leaders of their political parties. And then the next step needs to take place, and the next step ought to be that when negotiations are taking place over trade deals, then it must be made absolutely clear that we will not tolerate human rights abuses, and a trade deal is not more important than the loss of life or issues that are happening in Kashmir or Palestine or Burma or many other parts in the world. So I think it's got to be, the government has to lead on this. There's no going around it. Otherwise, we will talk about this, we will debate this, but ultimately the action will not take place where it's required.
Thank you for that. Political dynamics and decision making and power and all that is obviously very, very important. One of the things that are important in many ways, but the question that I want for you two to ponder upon, if that decision making power is being made within a cabinet where the representation perhaps is, I'm going to choose my words very carefully now, if the representation within that particular cabinet is swaying and being, that decision-making power has been determined more to do with the financial aspects as opposed to the human rights aspects because of people's own backgrounds and their own politics, without naming anybody, then is that not something to be concerned about? And I want to bring that to you.
Yeah, of course. We should all be concerned if that is the case.
And is it the case?
I don't think it's for me to say, or I've got no evidence to substantiate that, but I think successive governments have been accused of this sort of thing, and claims have been made of that nature. And if that is happening, that is totally unacceptable. It shouldn't happen, and we should be raising our voice as an elected member. If I certainly had evidence, I would raise that with my local MP and say, look, this shouldn't be happening. Please can you raise this with the relevant MP responsible for it or the cabinet? And I think we shouldn't be tolerating.
So I'll give you a practical example. One of the recent most practical examples I can think about is this red list that we've been talking about. And Pakistan was put on the red list. We had all the figures, coronavirus was rising, international travel is something we've been debating about. But India wasn't put on that red list. And one of the accusations that came out was that the people who were making those decisions are not putting them on the red list because they're from India. The people who have prominent positions within our present government, within that cabinet. I'm sure you have, I don't expect you to have the answer just because you happen to be the Conservative, but I'm just pondering that thought, people's feelings on that, and please do come in on that, County Councillor, is that that's what people are feeling, whether it's right or wrong, correct or not, factual or not, but they're saying it's because you've got people from a particular country sitting on that cabinet who are making trade deals, and they're more bothered about that than the fact that of protecting the people of United Kingdom and India are putting them on that red list.
I think to be honest with you, any action needs to be backed up with evidence. Yeah, all the evidence showed that the infection rates in certain parts of Europe and other countries, India in particular, were far higher than those in Pakistan at the time. And I think that's what really upset people. The government was going ahead and putting Pakistan on the red list, while next door in India, and we've seen the horrific scenes, horrific scenes of people dying outside hospitals, in the street, and not enough oxygen, not enough ventilators. We've seen that in India weeks and weeks after Pakistan was put on the red list. And I think the government let people down. There wasn't enough notice given before the red list came into operation. There were a number of companies, organisations who wanted to charter flights to bring back people who were out in Pakistan and wanted to come back before the red list came into being, and the British government, refused entry for those chartered flights, and I think that was abominable, and that's had a really negative impact on the community because I know people, and the Dean will know people, and come around that are stranded out there who are diabetics, who are looking to come back, people who are struggling for the medicines out there, and then people were taking alternative routes, Turkey in particular, where they were coming to Turkey.
And now look what's happening there, because they're going to
isolating 10 days, and after isolating for 10 days, they could fly into the UK. Right. So what's happened is that channel has now also been blocked because Turkey is now immediately on the red list. So there's huge issues for communities
Because the
from
red
Pakistan.
list, County Councillor and Councillor here, is not about punishment. It's not like a red card in football, is it?
No.
It's about protecting people, isn't it?
It is.
That's my understanding
Yeah.
of it. And I think maybe because of the fact that we call it a red list is perhaps people...
Shahaz, my view is that, look, you know, there are these countries with variants, yeah, and Pakistan has UK variant. You know, you heard Imran Khan and other politicians say that a UK variant, you know, is, you know, dominant in certain parts of Pakistan. That's because of travel and people coming in and out of the country. But, you know, in this country, we should have taken earlier steps to close down borders. We didn't. But now, there's no reason, because the testing regime is so strong and so good. If people are leaving Pakistan and they're having a negative PCR test and they're flying into the UK, there's nothing stopping them at the airport having another test and then asking them to isolate at home. But even when people are coming from Pakistan, they're being taken to London to hotels where the food isn't right, and they're not getting halal meals, the food is coming cold, people are fasting, and people are really struggling. And they're paying extortionate fees of £1,700 on top of what they're doing. I know of a family here in Pendle who had a number of people who wanted to come over, and they've been trying for 24 hours trying to get through this telephone line, which was a Bradford number, and they couldn't get through. And it took almost, you know, 36 hours to get through to the line, and I had to contact Naz Shah and Yasmin Qureshi to try and help. And the government didn't have the right preparation. So I think as community representatives, we also have a duty to go to our MPs and our government and say, look, actually you're discriminating, and I believe it's discrimination against these people who are coming in, because if yes, safety for the community is important, but you then make sure that the hotels are close by, they can get halal food, and in people who are fasting in Ramadan, that they get the support that they need, especially when, if you're locked in a bedroom with 3 children for 10 days,
Even
you know,
one day.
One day, you know, 1 hour.
A few hours.
It's sometimes difficult, but when you've got young children or elderly people, you know, who don't have the language skills and they're coming on their own, it's, you know, it's a very difficult situation.
Do you think it's discrimination, or do you think it's just a failure because they're just stupid? The people that are making these decisions on the hotels, is it short-sightedness? I mean, you're being very, very, very polite there. I'm thinking about the people that I've listened to, the emails that I've received, the phone calls that I've received, like all of us have, to try and help those people who feel that they were stranded for weeks and weeks there. They've come from Pakistan. They haven't come from some other country where that you don't know about the demographics of that country, or the ethnicity, or the gender. So these people are more than likely going to be fasting. More than likely, they have got certain dietary, you know, in terms of requirements. So they are going to be Muslim. Majority people coming from Pakistan. So they knew that. So is that not just stupidity, lack of intelligence? What is it?
I think ultimately, I'll start from the beginning in terms of the red list itself. Ultimately, like you said correctly, it is about protecting lives. It's about protecting, specifically talking about Pakistan, it's protecting Pakistan and also protecting the UK citizens here. And Imran Khan quite correctly mentioned in terms of the UK variant, and it was because of, that's the fact, whether we like it or not, the fact of the matter was it was people going from the UK, going to Pakistan, and the virus was spreading.
Well, the overseas Pakistanis couldn't have the weddings here, they couldn't do the parties here, they couldn't do much here, so they went to Pakistan and did everything there.
Yeah, but ultimately the government laid down clear guidelines as to reasons for travel.
Yes.
If people were going for them specific reasons, that's perfectly acceptable because we're within the laws. So that there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. The people went for, if there was a funeral or weddings as well, I think that was allowed. So I think that's perfectly acceptable. In terms of the second point, in terms of coming back and the testing process and people having to quarantine in hotels and whether the correct notice period was done, I think the government, yes, had to act very quickly. In terms of the same thing happened with India, because people who went to India were saying exactly the same thing in terms of when they went to the red list, that we weren't given enough notice, we're not be able to get flights back, and this is unfair. and we're being discriminated against.
But when it came
And
came to India, Councillor Nadeem, and you may not have all the answers, and I won't viewers to believe that we'll have all the answers. but generally speaking, when it came to, and it could have been any country, but in particular we're talking about India, we had all the facts, we had all the figures, we knew what was happening. Even the people within India were saying the same thing, and they were crying out for help. It didn't happen overnight, and they're talking about a double mutant there in terms of what's happening there. So it was, and if you look at in terms of the poverty and the demography, and look at that particular country compared to Pakistan, they've got a hell of a lot more going on there, a hell of a lot more people living in slums in those areas. It's a bigger country, but in terms of decision making by the government, was it? If you can't answer it, you can't answer it. But I want to put it to you and both of you.
Let me try.
Was it determined by the finances?
I don't think we can categorically say whether it was or it wasn't. I don't think we were in the decision-making process. We don't know what was being discussed and said. So I think it would be unfair and inaccurate for me or anybody else to comment on it. But I think ultimately pressure was applied because the figures were, before we saw all the images on TV, what was going on in India. And ultimately the government did make the decision. Perhaps, yes, maybe they were a bit slow and perhaps that decision should have been made earlier. But this pandemic, it's not been, in terms of government, have they handled it perfectly? I'm not going to sit here and try and justify that everything went perfectly. I think the government themselves will accept that. But it is something which we've never faced before. It was something which was a new thing, and decisions had to be made on a very short period of time. And some of the decisions have proven to be right, and some have been proven to be not quite right.
What I find quite interesting, though, is the fact that yesterday and today, one of the reasons for the success of this particular, for the Conservatives, like, if I may say, was the fact that they did ever so well when it came to the pandemic, and they did ever so well when it came to vaccinations. But yet, on this particular topic, we start to break it down internationally, what decisions have been made, travel, which country goes onto the red list, when it goes onto the red list, when it doesn't.
Can I just come in on that? I agree that, we went in the decision making, but I think, the ordinary man and woman on the street would look at it and say two things. Number one, in terms of pandemic, you said they ever so well. I don't think they did ever so well. 130,000 people have died, over 2,800 people have died here in Pendle. So I think Boris made lots of mistakes. However, people's memories are short term. So the rollout of the vaccination programme has been a huge success, and no one can doubt that. And the NHS has been fantastic.
But even that with the track and trace, I mean,
track and trace is still,
we seem to have forgotten about track and trace.
All the issues. I know what I'm saying. We've got short-term memories. The last a few weeks, but going back 4, 5, 6 months, all three of us, we were talking during the break, have all suffered from COVID. We went through the test and trace. We know how difficult it was, and we know in our community how many people have died. Nadeem and I can both look across our community and very quickly count the people who've died.
We've lost a whole generation
of people, and it's been heartbreaking. However, when it comes to these decisions making about red lists and stuff, whether people want to accept it or not, money comes into it. International policy and international relations comes into it, and there's no, if you look at the makeup of the cabinet, you've got Priti Patel, whose views on immigration and are very much to the right. And some of her views are abhorrent to me anyway, and to many of your viewers. Right? You've got Priti Patel, you've got not Ashok Kumar, you've got the business secretary, right? You've got Rishi Sunak, you've got all these people. Rishi Sunak's father-in-law is, one of the richest men in India. So there's business interests.
They happen to be from a particular diaspora.
They do affect things, and I'm sure that some of that did play a part. That's something that Nadeem can't control. Or anyone else. However, these things do come into play when people make their decisions on a very big international levels. If the cabinet had Sajid Javid was still in there, right, and it'd been, I think that might have changed the dynamics a bit, because I think those local interests and people's backgrounds do contribute to making decisions.
However those decisions are made, and and who's involved in those decision-making power, I think one of the things that we do agree on is that personality in politics and the dynamics of communities do make a difference. And I think it is fantastic to see that we've got a huge range of people now, a growing range of people from different diasporas of community. We are coming to the end of the programme. One of the things that we want to say to viewers that these are views that we may hold today, we may change it tomorrow, we may change it a bit later, but it's based upon the information that we have. And it's not about nitpicking on certain communities, and in particular from the Indian community, we know that have suffered just as much as the Pakistani community. Non-Muslims and Muslims have all suffered, and when we say we've lost generations, we've lost whole generations of people there. One of the things that I want to ask you, we've got in the last minute, when it comes to being part of this political process, if there was somebody out there who was thinking, having heard all this, to be involved in the future, tomorrow, how would you encourage them?
I mean, my own personal view is I think I would encourage all young people to get involved in politics, irrespective of which political party it is, because I think we all have a role to play in our local communities and raise and help our residents and our communities. So I think my message would be to the listeners, if anyone is thinking of getting involved in politics, please come forward, join a political party, but do your own research. Don't even listen to me, what Azar's saying here today. Do your own research. People are very intelligent. They've got social media. They've got access to the internet. Read about it. Look into the policies. And then come to your own view. Yeah. In which particular party they feel, or the policy that most tie in with what they believe in. I think that's the message I would give to you.
I don't want to rush you, but we are going to bring Cameron in as well. We've got a few seconds left. Azar, what would you say?
I'd say to people, look, if you want to make a difference in your community, you're concerned about what's happening in your community, get involved, become a school governor, get involved in other issues, apply to become a magistrate. If you want to become a councillor, look at what's happening in your community, look at which political party you think will, there's no one political party that's going to do everything for you, you're not going to agree with that, but which is more aligned to your values, to what you believe in, and join that party, get involved in the discussion, and if you want to stand for election, go down the selection process and go for it.
Excellent, thank you. And Cameron, I want to bring you back in from Yorkshire. I don't know if it's sunshine in there, but it feels very cold here. So your final words and encouraging people to become part of the process.
I think it's really important for young people to stop shouting at TVs, for stop getting them angry and protesting on the streets, but actually get involved in the process. Because as you know, a few moments ago, we were talking about red lists. There may be people around that table, around that discussion, who may be able to influence what decision the government ultimately took. So I think it's a case of no longer protesting on the streets, but actually getting into those meetings, getting involved, getting elected to make a difference. And if you really want to make a difference, then get involved in politics.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you again, Cameron. So thank you very much for joining us. It's wonderful to see you, and I hope you join us again. So here we are, end of the programme. It has been extraordinary, I think, in terms of what's happening across the country. And despite the pandemic, despite COVID, despite fasting, despite the horrible weather and everything else, we were out there campaigning, and we've managed to get the voters out and encouraged. And I hope to see you very soon on another election special. I am your host, Shanaz Sadiq. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz. Allah